All right, so we're going to start. My name is Raymond Lotta. I am a spokesperson for Revolution Books, a political economist, and a follower and advocate for the new communism developed by the revolutionary leader, Bob Avakian. And again, I want to welcome everyone to tonight's program. The title of my talk is The Communist Revolution So Badly Needed versus the anti-communist brainwash you're getting. Why am I giving this talk? Because of the high stakes at this juncture in history. Because everyone who cares about humanity and the planet faces an historic challenge. Our planet is on fire. This past summer was the hottest in 125,000 years. This is not some natural cycle or freak series of events, but the cumulative and escalating result of the burning of fossil fuels by the capitalist imperialist system. A system that plunders nature for profit, whose inner compulsion is the competitive drive to expand for profit and more profit. The prospect of an uninhabitable Earth is real. We are facing the real and growing danger of world war, of nuclear war, as the US and Russia wage their indirect war with each other over Ukraine, as the US steps up its war maneuvers and war preparations against imperialist China. The prospect of a nuclear war between the US and Russia that would leave 5 billion dead is real. This is a world in which almost 1 in 3 women is subjected to physical or sexual violence, in which 100 million people last year were refugees, forcibly displaced by persecution, disaster, poverty, and conflict. It is a world of cruel, globalized exploitation, of high-tech supply chains originating in the rich capitalist countries that incorporate sweatshops employing millions of women from Bangladesh to Guatemala. Chains of misery that extend deep into cobalt mines in Congo, where children are digging tunnels and hauling rocks to enhance the profitability of the likes of Apple. This is what America's vaunted standard of living rests on. And this is a world of savage inequality in which the richest 1% have accumulated nearly twice as much wealth as the rest of the world put together over the last 2 years. In the US and elsewhere, fascism is on the rise and on a rampage, aiming to impose a theocratic order of viciously enforced patriarchy and anti-LGBTQ terror, naked white supremacy, and virulent, know-nothing, make America great patriotism, outlawing critical thinking and the teaching of historical truth. The world cries out for revolution, a revolution to overthrow and put an end to this system of capitalist imperialism, the system that is the cause of all of what I've been describing. As the revolutionary leader Bob Avakian has said, we can no longer afford to allow these imperialists to dominate the world and determine the destiny of humanity. And it is a scientific fact that humanity does not have to live this way. Bob Avakian has charted a way out of the madness with the new communism. He has further developed the Marxist scientific method and approach for understanding and transforming society and the world. He has forged a strategy for making revolution with a real chance of winning, and brought forward a vision and blueprint in the Constitution for the new socialist republic in North America for a truly liberatory socialist society on the road to a communist world in which human beings can truly flourish and become caretakers of the planet. People need to know about this, learn about this, and become part of the revolution to change everything and protect the planet. But the same capitalist imperialist system that has brought the planet to this horrendous pass has ruled communist revolution off the agenda. Its functionaries and ideologues, its anointed experts and storytellers, its media tell you, remind you, drill into your head that communism is a utopian project that inevitably turns into totalitarian nightmare. It's as though a warning label were affixed to your hopes and dreams for a better world. Danger, go there. But really, should it be a surprise that this system, based on exploitation, inequality, and the commodification of everything, and that rules the world, is it really a surprise that it would be indoctrinating you with the idea that communism, the opposite of all of this, is the worst imaginable scenario for humanity? The truth is that the first stage of communist revolution led to history's first socialist states in Russia, 1917 to 1956, and China from 1949 to 1976. These are among the most momentous episodes of the last 175 years, the first attempts in modern history to build societies free from exploitation and oppression. They accomplished amazing things against incredible odds. This is precious experience to be learned from with a critical scientific approach, both the achievements and the errors, including grievous errors. But this experience has been subjected to more slander, lies, and distortion than any other historical events of the 20th century, bar none. There are the supposedly scholarly works that traffic in half-truths and lies, and a little later in this talk I'm going to give a shocking example of that. There are the highly promoted memoirs of hardship and suffering. Evaluating communism this way would be like trying to understand the Civil War by relying on the sob stories of dispossessed plantation owners. The official verdict that communism is a promised utopia turned into nightmare has become a kind of institutionalized conventional wisdom, including and especially in academia. And this puts a lid on people's capacity to conceive of a world beyond capitalism, precisely when revolution is more urgently needed and more possible. Houston, we have a problem. The universities that should be alive with radical and revolutionary thought, students who should be catalysts for revolution in society, are weighed down by this verdict about communism. It lowers sights, chains people ideologically to this system. That has to change. We have to work to change this, and quickly, because the clock is ticking. This is why I am opening up debate about the past and future of communist revolution and the future of humanity. This is why I am opening people's eyes to the new communism, a whole new framework for human emancipation that enables us to understand the achievements and the problems of these first socialist revolutions, and to go beyond these first revolutions to a qualitatively more emancipating future. At this dangerous juncture, we have two choices: live with all this horror and condemn future generations to the same or worse, if they have a future at all, or make revolution. So let's start where we need to start. What is communism? What is socialism? Communism is, first of all, the scientific method and approach for analyzing and synthesizing human social development and the prospects for human emancipation. Now, we don't have time to get into what is called historical materialism, but this is the scientific breakthrough by Karl Marx that enables us to grasp the structure and functioning of society, the interconnections between the economic base or system of production of society at a certain stage of material development, and society's political institutions, culture, and values. It's like a house with many floors, rooms, and activities going on. All of that sits on a certain foundation. So in a capitalist country like the United States, the government, the police, the educational system, the media, they are not free floating. They rest on and serve the exploitation, rest on and serve the economic foundation of an exploitative capitalist system. When someone tells you that our children must be prepared to compete in the global economy, in the global marketplace, that's an ideological statement reflecting the capitalist economic foundation of society. The scientific approach of historical materialism also helps us understand, enables us to understand the dynamics that drive social conflict and social change. For instance, how changes in the economy and social conditions of life have influenced the struggles of Black people. Historical materialism enables us to understand why revolutions are necessary to resolve the contradictions of society. It enables us to understand how human society has now reached a threshold, an historic threshold of development, where for the first time in human history, it is possible to get beyond a world of scarcity and antagonistic social conflict. Now, you can read Breakthroughs by Bob Avakian to get deeply into all of this. Now, like any science, communism develops, interrogates itself, confronts new problems and advances. And through decades of work, Bob Avakian has put communism on a more scientific and emancipatory foundation. So this is the first point. Communism is the scientific theory, the method and approach guiding the living struggle to achieve a communist world. Communism is the goal of revolution. Communism is a world where people work and struggle together for the common good, where everyone contributes whatever they can to society and gets back what they need for a life worthy of human beings, where there are no more divisions among the people in which some rule over and oppress others, robbing them not only of the means to a decent life, but also knowledge and the means for really understanding and acting on the world. Communism can only exist on a global level. It is a world community of humanity. It is a society and world in which all systems of exploitation where all systems of production based on exploitation have been overcome. in which all class divisions that arise from exploitative systems of production have been overcome, in which all oppressive social relations, such as between men and women and differently gendered people, between different nationalities and racial groupings, between those who principally work in the realm of ideas and administration and those who principally work with their hands, have been overcome. And all the ideas and values like male supremacy, me, individualism, that flow from and reinforce all of this have been overcome. So what is socialism? It is three things. It is a new form of political power in which the formerly oppressed and exploited, in alliance with the middle classes and professionals and the great majority of society, rule over society with the leadership of a visionary vanguard party. This revolutionary state power keeps old and new exploiters in check. It makes possible a democracy that A, unleashes the creativity and initiative of people in all kinds of directions, and B, gives the masses of people the right and the ability to change the world and to engage in meaningful decision making that promotes the most far-reaching debate and that protects the rights of the individual. This new socialist state that I'm talking about is a launching pad to promote and spread revolution in the world. Second, socialism is a new economic system in which the resources and productive capacities of society are socially owned and utilized through the socialist state, where production is consciously organized and planned to meet social need and to overcome social inequalities like the oppression of different racial and national groupings and the subordination of women. This is an economy that is organized to promote revolution in the world and to protect the planet. No longer does exploitation and profit rule over society and people's lives. It is an economy based on cooperation, not competition. No longer are big pharma and financial insurance conglomerates setting the terms for healthcare provision and research. They won't exist anymore. No longer is there a General Motors, Boeing, or ExxonMobil skewing transport development and energy production to the needs of profit. They won't exist anymore either. Third, socialism is a historical transition between capitalism and communism. It is a period of revolutionary struggle and experimentation to transform all the economic structures, all the social institutions and social arrangements, and all the ideas and values that perpetuate the division of society into classes. Now, if you read the Constitution for the New Socialist Republic in North America, can I have a copy, please? Authored by Bob Avakian, you will see the blueprint and vision for the kind of liberating and multifaceted socialist society that is needed in today's world. And just so there's no confusion, there are no socialist countries in the world today. Cuba and North Korea, for example, are state capitalist welfare states. The China of today is a capitalist imperialist country. Socialism in China was overthrown in 1976 by new capitalist forces. Now you can go to the literature table in the back and get an article by Bob Avakian that gets at what real socialism is about. The title of this article is Three Alternative Worlds. The first alternative is the world as it is, which is an unacceptable horror. The second alternative is a kind of social welfare state that may call itself socialist, but is not. The masses of people are still largely reduced to being producers of wealth and are kept passive. They are not empowered to take ever greater responsibility for the radical transformation of society. The third alternative is genuine socialism. It pivots on what Marx called the two radical ruptures, the rupture with traditional property relations and the rupture with traditional ideas. A society in which not only are people's basic needs being met, but in which they are thrashing out and debating the biggest questions of governance, the direction of society, the environmental emergency, culture, science, philosophy, and the arts. Now I want to move on to talk about the anti-communist brainwash. You know, I was at a sociology conference a few weeks back, building for this event and for my tour on campuses. A student took issue with me saying, communism is a dictatorship. And I agree there are problems in America, but we do have rights and we can vote. Well, with all due respect, that is the system speaking through someone's mouth. The fact is, you and I, we are living right now under a dictatorship. Why do the police protect capitalist property and murder black and brown people? Why have the FBI and other state agencies infiltrated and repressed radical and revolutionary groups like the Black Panther Party in the 1960s and early 70s? Why are the jails filled with poor people and people of color? Why does the United States have 700 military bases around the world? Why has it carried out genocidal wars and countless invasions and coups? Because a dictatorship of the U.S. capitalist imperialist class is violently enforcing its class rule and global empire. Yes, the ruling class organizes elections, but please, this is not about empowering you, but diluting and controlling you, winning your allegiance and shaping your thinking through this bourgeois electoral ritual involving different representatives of the capitalist imperialist ruling class. As Avakian says, democracy is just a form of dictatorship. And here's the bigger point. Not all dictatorships are bad. Let me repeat that. Not all dictatorships are bad. Avakian provides a concise scientific definition of dictatorship. It is the institutionalized power to make things happen and to overcome resistance to making them happen. As long as people are divided, as long as society is divided into different classes with interests that are fundamentally opposed, there will be dictatorship. Whether it is a good dictatorship or a bad dictatorship depends on who is doing, which class is doing the dictating, and for what, toward what end, and with what methods. So is it a class? Is it a class of capitalist exploiters brutally exercising power over the masses? Or is it a dictatorship exercised by the masses of people with a government and leaders that really represent their fundamental interests in getting beyond all this exploitation and oppression? Look, When the Russian Revolution triumphed in 1917, the new socialist state power, the dictatorship of the proletariat, instituted seismic changes. It gave backing to powerful struggles to liberate women from church-sanctioned marriage, institutionalized male domination, the forced veiling of women in Central Asian republics, and more. When the Chinese Revolution triumphed in 1949, the new state power launched the most far-reaching land reform in history, empowering the peasants to stand up to and break the hold of the old landlord class and put an end to the suffering that oppressive rule brought with it. And here's something else about dictatorship. The aim of the socialist transition to communism that I talked about earlier is to get to the point where humanity is no longer divided into masters and slaves, where there is no need and no basis for dictatorship, no one with the interest and power to dictate to others, and no one in a position to be dictated over. So that's on the brainwash about dictatorship. Now I want to turn to another form of the brainwash, and this is the anti-communist theory of totalitarianism that has so much intellectual currency in liberal discourse. Totalitarianism is a concept most famously associated with the political philosopher Hannah Arendt and her work of the 1950s. More recently, this theory has been repurposed by Yale historian Timothy Snyder in his 2011 book, Bloodlands. The central claim of totalitarian theory is that fascism, more especially Nazism and Hitler, more specifically Nazism and Hitler, and communism, more specifically the Soviet Union under Stalin, are cut from the same cloth. These ideologies and practices, according to the theory of totalitarianism, aim to establish total control over people, to turn them into unthinking robots and resort to mass extermination. The fundamental purpose of totalitarian theory is to discredit communism by equating Stalin and Mao with Hitler, and to prettify and glorify Western imperialism. Forget America's founding, its genocide and slavery. Forget its imperial wars and occupation, its nuclear incineration of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This equation of Hitler and Stalin, of Nazi Germany and the Socialist Soviet Union of the 1930s, of fascism and communism, is built on lies and ignorance. So let's do a quick compare and contrast. Point one, fascism and communism are two utterly different economic systems. The German economy under Hitler maintained and enforced the system of capitalist ownership and control and the exploitation of wage labor, and was transformed into a predatory, militarized economy. The German imperialist state sought to gain control over the resources and labor of vast stretches of Europe and beyond through annexation, war, and plunder, including the invasion of Russia in 1941, resulting in the deaths of 26 million Soviet people. By way of contrast, the revolution under Stalin led to history's first planned socialist economy. Unlike capitalism, it operated according to the principle of production for social need, not profit in command, providing for the material and cultural needs of the people and bringing workers and peasants into positions of responsibility. The Soviet socialist economy was not driven, nor did it seek to expand and exploit globally or to colonize peoples and regions. Point 2, Nazi Germany promoted racial purity. The Socialist Soviet Union promoted multinational, multi-ethnic equality and unity of nationalities. The Nazis aimed to establish the rule of the so-called German master race over Europe and the East. Only racially fit Germans were deemed suitable to reproduce. The Nazi racial state ultimately embarked on a program of genocidal extermination of the Jewish people in Germany and Europe. By way of contrast, the Socialist Soviet Union was the world's first multinational state based on equality. It valued and promoted ethnic diversity. It waged campaigns against great Russian chauvinism, which is like white supremacy in the United States. It created autonomous regions where minority nationalities, previously forbidden from using their own languages in schools and official public life, could do so. Soviet scientists and educators worked to explode the myth of backward and superior races. Nowhere else in the world at this time in the 1920s and 1930s was this going on, especially the United States, where segregation and white supremacy were the law of the land and lynching of blacks in the South was rampant. The Russian Revolution also took immediate and bold measures to put an end to the persecution of the Jewish people. The Soviet Union was the only fucking country in Eastern and Central Europe that outlawed anti-Semitism, and in the run-up to and during World War II actually sought to save the lives of massive numbers of Jewish people. Some 200,000 Polish Jews were spared Nazi extermination as a result of the actions and policies of the Red Army and Soviet government. Point 3, Nazi fascist ideology and communist ideology are antithetical modes of thinking. The Nazi world outlook was based on concepts of German blood and soil, racial purity, male supremacy, hatred and contempt for critical thinking, and out-and-out irrationalism. By way of contrast, communism is a science, as I've been describing. It is internationalist. It requires the rational, scientific investigation and understanding of reality. It aims to transform reality to bring a world free of exploitation and oppression into being, based on the real-world potential to forge such a world and the conscious struggle of oppressed humanity and all who aspire to such a world. So the theory of totalitarianism is, in a nutshell, extremely harmful bullshit. Fascists and communists are completely opposed and worlds apart. But Bob Avakian has also interrogated certain issues raised by anti-communist proponents of totalitarianism, and I want to briefly touch on this. One of these problems he has identified is the establishment of an official ideology in socialist society that people must accept. On the one hand, there needs to be a visionary, scientifically based communist vanguard to lead the complex process of going forward towards communism. And the philosophy and science of communism, Marxism, must be popularized and occupy a leading position in society so that the masses of people can gain the knowledge and the method to understand and change the world to cast off superstition and erroneous ways of thinking. But it is wrong to require in socialist society that people profess agreement with communist ideology in order to get along in society and take responsibility in society. You don't want a situation where people are forced or pressured to think in a certain way. People must be won to Marxism, to communism, and must consciously and voluntarily embrace it. Those who agree with it should proclaim it. Those who disagree should say so, all of which will contribute to the vibrancy of socialist society. And this relates to the historic significance of this Constitution for the new socialist republic in North America, written by Bob Avakian. Because this Constitution is dealing with a fundamental and difficult contradiction of socialist society. As Avakian has observed, humanity really does need revolution and communism. But on the other hand, not all of humanity wants that all the time, including in socialist society. You don't want a forced march to communism. But once you make a liberatory revolution and establish a socialist society with all that that means to humanity, you can't just have yearly votes about whether to go back to capitalism. So this Constitution is constructed so that you have the institutional means to keep the socialist system moving towards communism, unless the people are overwhelmingly against that. But this Constitution is at the same time constructed in such a way that you have to repeatedly win people to fight to stay on the socialist road, relying on evidence, contestation and debate between different programs and platforms, and critical thinking. And something else. In assessing the theory and practice of the first stage of communist revolution, Bob Avakian has developed communist morality. He has broken with the poisonous notion that the ends justifies the means. The means and methods of communist revolution must flow from and serve the goal of a society and a world in which human beings can truly flourish. In other words, you can't, for instance, invent facts or narratives to win people's allegiance. You can't make revolution with terror or defend a socialist country by means of nuclear weapons. Again, the means and methods of communist revolution must flow from and serve the goal of a society and world in which human beings can truly flourish. Get ready. Now, I want to move on and talk about one of the most slandered episodes of the first stage of communist revolution, the Cultural Revolution of China of 1966 to 1976. And to illustrate how this brainwash works, I'm going to reference the book, Mao's Last Revolution, by Roderick McFarquhar and Michael Schoenhaus, published by Harvard University Press in 2006. This book, I have it here, this book is promoted as the definitive account of the Cultural Revolution. It is a portrait of Mao Zedong, as a monster who, to quote them, had no scruples in taking human life. Now, to buttress this lie, the authors talk about an alleged meeting where Mao is setting the course for the Cultural Revolution. And on page 102, can people see that? I will have to read it. And on page 102, I'm going to read it. The authors quote Mao as saying, this is what they say, Mao's, this man Hitler was even more ferocious. The more ferocious, the better, don't you think? And here's the operative phrase. The more people you kill, the more revolutionary you are, end quote. That's on page 102 of this book. Now, this is an ugly statement. The more people you kill, the more revolutionary you are. And any serious student of Mao and the Chinese Revolution would want to know the source of it. So, let's do that and go to the footnote on page 515. And here it is. What's the source of that statement that the more people you kill, the more revolutionary you are? From a very reliable source seen by one of the authors. Oh. Oh my God. The fucking source is, trust me. What kind of scholarship is this? Well, when it comes to communism, and Mao in particular, anything goes. And you know what? This is one of the most widely quoted statements from the book. The more people you kill, the more revolutionary you are. Andrew Nathan, any Columbia students here? Who teaches at Columbia, he requoted it in an article in the New Republic. Another prominent anti-communist China expert, Jonathan Mirsky, he quoted it in the New York Review of Books. It's in a major 2016 article in The Economist entitled, "It Was the Worst of Times." And so the brainwash works this way. Running through academia, to the respected journals of opinion, to the internet. If you're a student doing a research paper on Mao and the Cultural Revolution, you're likely to run into that quote. But you know what? There's more. It turns out that on an obscure thread on Reddit in 2015, one of the authors of Mao's, one of the co-authors of Mao's Last Revolution, admitted to a tiny chat group that he got it all wrong in the translation. Let's put it up. Mao actually said, the greater the number of people murdered, the greater the wish on the part of the survivors for a revolution. In other words, the total opposite of what appears in this authoritative, definitive account of the Cultural Revolution. But the damage is done. Mission fucking accomplished. I could spend the rest of my life refuting, you can turn that off. I could spend the rest of my life refuting these kinds of slanders. Stalin murdered tens of millions. Mao was indifferent to human life, when the truth is life expectancy doubled during the Mao years, from 32 to 65 years of age, between 1949 and 1976. Now, This past May, the New York Times featured a typical high-profile attack on the Cultural Revolution by the liberal anti-communist columnist Pamela Paul. She repeats standard issue lies that intellectuals were tortured and that the horrors of Maoism resulted in 1.6 million to 2 million deaths, with no substantiation or analysis. The Cultural Revolution was, in her words, quote, a political trauma in which, quote, comrade turned on comrade, friend upon friend, husband upon wife, and child upon parent, end quote. It is the anti-communist trope that revolutions eat their children. So let's pull the lens back to get at the truth. In 1949, the Chinese Revolution led by Mao triumphed. It had mobilized tens and hundreds of millions of peasants, workers, and broader sections of society in heroic struggle to put an end to the savageries of imperialist domination and landlord rule. But the seizure of power in 1949 was, as Mao emphasized, not the end point, but the beginning of a complex process and struggle of transforming society and thinking. Mao was leading people on the socialist road. Hundreds of millions were taking up the cause of forging a society free from exploitation and oppression. But a new capitalist class had arisen within the structures of the Communist Party and the new socialist state. And they were organizing to take China down the capitalist road. The roots of this new bourgeois class under socialism lay in the continuing economic and social inequalities of socialist society. It lay in the continuing use of money and price in the economy, in the continuing influence of traditional ideas, values, and culture. Mao made the unprecedented analysis of the danger of capitalist restoration under socialism and how to combat this in ways that mobilized and raised the consciousness of the masses. In 1966, Mao launched the Cultural Revolution, which was a kind of revolution within the revolution. He called on the masses of people to rise up to overthrow these new bourgeois forces and prevent the restoration of capitalism, and to carry the revolution forward towards a communist world. The monumental struggle and the incredible transformations that took place in the decade 1966-76 were a source of inspiration and direction for oppressed humanity and all who sought total emancipation in a new world. The women's liberation movement around the world, many of the most radical elements within it were studying and listening to what was happening in China during the Cultural Revolution. The Black Panther Party popularized the Red Book. I, as a student, was radicalized by the Cultural Revolution and what it represented, the idea of a total revolution. As for the methods of the Cultural Revolution, no, it was not vengeful violence of people willy-nilly turning on each other, as Pamela Paul in her New York Times article argues. You can read the documents issued by the Maoist leadership. You can read real accounts of the struggle in books that are available here at Revolution Books. The main forms of struggle during the Cultural Revolution were: one, mass debate over policy and the direction of society; two, mass political mobilization, demonstrations, strikes, political uprisings that led to new and more participatory forms of political power, and mass criticism in public gatherings and assemblies of officials and administrators who were losing touch with the masses and pushing programs that would take China down the capitalist road. Acts of violence and killings did take place during the Cultural Revolution. But here is what the evidence shows. Violent conflict was not the main trend of the Cultural Revolution. And it was not the orientation of Mao. But when things went in a violent direction, Mao and the revolutionary forces condemned and criticized this through statements, directives, editorials, and on-the-ground interventions. And in fact, much of the violence that occurred was actually instigated by the new capitalist forces, especially for the purpose of discrediting Mao. No, the Cultural Revolution was not, as Pamela Paul says in her New York Times article, political trauma. It was political liberation. Society was sprung in the air. New systems of factory management, of political governance, enabled workers and peasants to take greater responsibility for the direction of society. Open-door research, what was called open-door research, brought scientists to the countryside to conduct experiments alongside peasants and to share their lives. The Cultural Revolution brought forth the most egalitarian, needs-based healthcare system in the world at the time. A new revolutionary culture was being created with ballets and operas that synthesized Western and non-Western dance and musical techniques and styles. A culture that told of the struggle for a new world of women awakened to liberation. The ethos of serve the people was spread and taken up throughout society. Were intellectuals persecuted, punished, and killed off as a category? No. This is tales from the crypt nonsense. But there were shortcomings and problems in the larger approach of the Cultural Revolution. In attempting to narrow the great divide between mental and manual labor, in promoting new revolutionary art and cultural activity by peasants and workers, too many constraints were placed on professional, artistic, and intellectual work and experiment. There was not, during the Cultural Revolution, the understanding of the great importance of dissent, including dissent from anti-socialist perspectives in socialist society, in a socialist society that is moving towards communism. Oppositional dissent can reveal problems and shortcomings in socialist society. The Constitution for the new socialist republic in North America emphasizes the vital and indispensable role of dissent and intellectual and cultural ferment and the unfettered search for the truth in socialist society. How this must be fostered on an unprecedented scale as part of the very fabric of socialist society in which critical thinking flowers. Put differently, if we're going to change the world profoundly, we need to understand it deeply. Here we must step back again. In October 1976, the capitalist rulers in China staged a reactionary coup and began the process of restoring capitalism. This marked the end of the first stage of communist revolution. In 1977, Bob Avakian made an historic analysis of Mao's last great struggle, of the struggle at the top levels of the Communist Party of China between the revolutionary forces on the one side and new capitalist forces on the other, who are masquerading as practical socialists. He identified and examined the critical factors underlying the defeat of the revolution. He drew out the implications of the loss in China for all those across the planet who yearn to be free. At a juncture of disorientation and demoralization among communist forces worldwide, Bob Avakian took responsibility for leading genuine communists forward in the face of and learning from this terrible defeat. And Bob Avakian continued to sum up the first stage of communist revolution. He analyzed changes in the world. He drew from diverse spheres of human endeavor. Of critical importance, he subjected Marxism itself to deep inquiry and has resolved the contradiction between the fundamentally scientific method and approach of communism and those aspects of communism from Marx onward that actually run counter to this. For instance, during the Cultural Revolution, the Maoists put forth that the proletariat has its truth and the bourgeoisie has its truth. This is wrong. Truth is truth, whoever discovers and propounds it. Truth is what corresponds to reality. And this notion of class truth is not only philosophically wrong, it is an obstacle, as Avakian also emphasizes, to getting beyond a world where might makes right, where what is true is based on who has the authority, the power to declare and enforce it, rather than, again, truth being what corresponds to reality. This idea of class truth, or truth as a narrative, stands in the way of knowing the world as it really is and as it really can be. It is an obstacle to getting to communism, where people are consciously and voluntarily changing themselves and the world based on real knowledge. Bob Avakian has forged the new communism that makes possible a new stage of communist revolution, in which we can go further and do far better in creating a world that people would really want to live in. You can look at the appendix of the book, The New Communism, and we've reprinted that appendix here that you can pick up on your way out, for an outline of the core elements of this new communism. Now, I want to touch on one of those elements as I near the conclusion of this talk. In developing a radically new framework for socialist society, Bob Avakian points to the need for what he calls a solid core, communist leadership, and people struggling to keep society moving towards a classless world. At the same time, and on that basis, he also points to the need for maximum elasticity, the ability of people to debate, to explore, to experiment, to go off in different directions, to act on unresolved questions and contradictions, like carrying forward the struggle to fully emancipate women. You need to be discovering and opening up new pathways of transforming society and thinking, and you're gaining new understanding. Now, this new framework of solid core with a lot of elasticity will get tense and wild at times, including protests, strikes, and upheavals that can destabilize socialist society. The Constitution for the new socialist republic in North America makes it very clear that protest will not be suppressed in the new socialist society, as long as opposition does not take the form of organized attempts to undermine and overthrow the socialist state. But you have to be prepared. You have to be prepared to go, as Avakian says, to the brink of being drawn and quartered, to the brink of losing power without losing power. And once again, you need visionary communist leadership to learn from and lead this complex process forward. In concluding, I want to return to where I started this talk: the intolerable state of the world and the urgent need and real possibility for revolution. The document, We Are the Revcoms, which people can get at the table in front, explains, and I quote, "This is a rare time when the capitalist imperialists who rule over us in this country are deeply divided in a way they have not been since the Civil War in the 1860s, and the country is being ripped apart, with one section moving toward an outright fascist form of rule, with the other fighting for the horrific way things have been. They cannot resolve these deep divisions and hold the country together on the basis of the normal way the system is operated. And in any case, that normal way is full of oppression, destruction, and the real danger of wiping out humanity. For these reasons, this revolution we are working for is urgently necessary and more possible," end quote. This rare time is an historic opportunity, not a guarantee, but a real chance to leap into a whole new world. And the Revcoms, followers of Bob Avakian, are seizing on and working on this rare opening to make revolution. What is the aim of the revolutionary struggle to be waged? It is, and I quote, "to finally defeat the violent forces of this monstrous system, to abolish this system with all its oppressive institutions and its governing U.S. Constitution, and to establish a far better system based on the Constitution for the new socialist republic in North America." And what are the core demands of this struggle that must become the demand and rallying cry of millions in society? This is set forth in the document, We Need and We Demand a Whole New Way to Live, a fundamentally different system. And people can get this on their way out or as they stay for discussion afterward. What are these core demands? 1, a whole new dimension of freedom and rights for the people. 2, a whole different economy to meet fundamental needs and serve highest interests. 3, eliminating discrimination, inequality, and oppression in every form. 4, education to actually educate and empower the masses of people. 5, healthcare to serve the people. 6, abolishing nuclear weapons, finally abolishing war, and systematically addressing the environmental emergency. Compare that with the U.S. Constitution, an exploiter's constitution. Think of what a revolution in the belly of the beast, of the biggest imperialist dominator and oppressor on the planet, would mean to the people of the world, the hope and inspiration it would bring. Day one, the murderous police force of the old system is dismantled and replaced by people's security forces. Day one, the new state power starts dismantling the global network of military bases and sweatshops of the old empire. Day one, we move quickly to put the oil companies out of business and keep the oil in the ground and begin the process of rapidly restructuring and creating a sustainable socialist economy, opening up great debate, unleashing know-how and creative energy from all quarters of society, and so much more. So yes, the anti-communist brainwash is pervasive and confuses and disorients people. And we have to struggle hard for the truth and raise people's sights. But we also have a lot going for us. The productive capacity, the technology, the know-how, the interconnectedness of world humanity open up incredible potential to solve material and social problems and to act on the environmental emergency, but only on the basis of a fundamentally different system. We have the rare and unique leadership of Bob Avakian, who has rescued the communist project and taken it higher, and who is giving ongoing leadership to the revolution. We have the strategy to make this revolution and the vision and blueprint for a liberatory socialist society. This revolution is in the interest of the billions in all parts of the world who are denied a decent life and a future worth living, or any future at all. So to those in the room tonight, and to those who are watching, who yearn for a radically different and far better world, there is nothing more urgent, nothing more meaningful that you can be doing with your lives than becoming part of, spreading, and contributing to this revolution, to this communist revolution, to emancipate humanity and protect the planet. Thank you.